Crave was conceived as a way to deliver our strong educational mission and our membership's desire for their continued learning. Through the Crave series, our chapter will deliver webinars and virtual meetings to deliver timely and relevant topics that are affecting our industry today.
It's about the effort that we expend to connect with people. But you have an opportunity to see people, you have an opportunity to chat with people. We may not have an opportunity to have appetizers and share a drink with each other, but we stay connected, and that's really the most important thing.
Being able to work together and learn together in a new format, a new environment, really helped us take those pre-existing relationships and friendships that I had to another level.
CoreNet has taken the leadership in these kinds of conversations for years and years, and so we're delighted to have this long-term relationship with CoreNet.
I found the CoreNet to be a great community of dedicated real estate professionals, and what it means to me is it gives me a wider network of people with whom to share ideas, to derive the best learnings, to test and experiment with things that I'm working on.
This program is all about personal growth and becoming the leader that you want to be.
CoreNet has always led the way when it comes to supporting the professional development of our members. Our roundtable discussions, our education workshops, and our professional development programs are just part of what makes CoreNet so valuable to our members. It was critical for us to find a way to still be able to facilitate all of this. Crave has provided us the platform to be just as effective and to still provide that value to our members in a virtual environment.
CoreNet not only provides a platform for different groups to come together regardless where you come from in terms of organization, but really help each member to feel like they belong in this organization.
We have a diverse membership base, and you will find that members come from all walks of life and from all over the world. However, it's still an area of focus for us to improve upon and to embrace equity, inclusion, and diversity through increasing awareness and taking action, as we know this will lead to more success for the organization and for our members.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our latest Crave series, Is Flexibility a Stretch? How companies can leverage flex space within their post-pandemic portfolio. I'm Denise Piet. I'm a vice president at STV DPM. We provide owners project management and move management services to the Boston market. I'm also a proud member of the CoreNet New England Board of Directors, and I'm going to run through some front-end chapter business, and then I will hand off to our moderator, Suzanne LeBlanc. So we have some additional Crave webinars coming up in the next few weeks. On June 21st, Self-Advocacy in the Age of Hybrid Work, and June 24th, Through the Lens of Innovation, Olympus Corporation of the Americas. So hope you can join us for those. And as always, join our conversation on social media. We are very active in participating in Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you have any communications that you'd like us to put out for you, please contact Stephen Smith at Stephen Smith Northstar. And a big thank you to our corporate partners. Your support is so valuable to our chapter and to these programs. Our platinum sponsors, our gold and silver sponsors. Thank you again for all your support over the past 14 months. If you need to ask a question of our speakers, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom, not the chat function. We'll be monitoring those questions for you along the way. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce our moderator, Suzanne LeBlanc. Suzanne joined Habsburg Real Estate in 2020 as Director of Real Estate, responsible for the FM Global portfolio. She manages a worldwide portfolio of 2.3 million square feet in 62 locations in 28 countries. FM Global is a mutual commercial property insurance company with an expertise solely dedicated to property risk management and the resilience of its client owners. Prior to that, Suzanne has held real estate positions with Mercury System, Dassault Systems, Nokia, Banco Santander, and State Street Corporation, with responsibility for real estate strategy, transactions, design and construction projects, and facilities. Suzanne has been active with the Cornet New England family for many years and is currently a member of the Education Committee. In 2005, Suzanne was the Cornet New England America's Real Estate Executive of the Year and was on the board of directors from 2016 to 2020. So thank you, Suzanne, and thanks for being our moderator today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Denise. I'm a little embarrassed now. You gave me such a lengthy bio there when I'm only the moderator. And of course, the stars of the show are going to be introduced here momentarily. I did want to just start by acknowledging my co-host for the program today, Jason Helmer of Hayworth, who is online with us. And so he will be keeping an eye on the Q&A and sharing those with the panelists towards the end of the program, as well as helping me keep an eye on the time here as we go. So speaking of time, we're going to try and jump right into it. I'm going to keep the bios or intros pretty brief here, just so that we can really get into the meat of today's topic. So I'd like to start by introducing Lindsay Wester. She's a Senior Director of Corporate Communications at CBRE for their advisory and transaction services. So Lindsay led the brand and communications for CBRE's flexible office space solutions and their subsidiary, Hana. Lindsay was responsible for the creation and execution of all facets of Hana's brand and communications strategy to drive adoption of the service by companies of all sizes. She worked closely with the sales and brokerage teams to educate their clients on the advantages of adding flexible space to their portfolio, and she partnered with landlords as well to meet their property marketing needs surrounding Hana's flexible operations. Lindsay is now the Senior Director of Communications for CB's Advisory and Transaction Services, and there she's focused and responsible for liaising with senior leadership to translate business line strategy into audience-specific internal and external education. So we look forward to being educated by Lindsay today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Sean Deaton, who's a vice president at IWG, where he leads the global enterprise team. And for those who may not be completely familiar with IWG, that is a company or a group that now includes Regus Spaces and HQ, among many other companies worldwide. So sure, everybody's familiar with at least one, if not more of those. Sean has successfully led the global enterprise team throughout the revolution of the flexible workspace industry. For the past 10 plus years, he's guided the team in delivering global solutions to 90% of the Fortune 500 companies, which is certainly an impressive statistic. Sean focuses on aligning teams to provide value-added solutions to successfully enable clients to exceed their strategic objectives. Most recently, he's responsible for helping hundreds of enterprise clients to enable their workforce to truly work from anywhere. Sean is joining us today from Texas, where he's based. So Sean, we want to welcome you to Cornet New England and hope that it's not too hot where you are today. So, and last.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne.
Yes, thank you again for joining us here in New England. So. And we hope that you won't lose power or anything during this next hour. And And last, but certainly not least, Brittany Lane, who currently serves as WeWork's Global Account Director. She is based here in Boston with us. She consults with a variety of enterprise clients on their global flexible real estate portfolios. She currently develops global return to work strategies for WeWork's largest healthcare and life science partnerships, which, as we know, is certainly a focus of specific interest here in the Boston area. She joined the WeWork and real estate industry after having worked at LEK Consulting and Gerson Lerman's group's private equity team. So we're very interested to hear her perspectives as well today. So without further ado, we're going to start with our first question for the panel. And what I'd like each of our panelists to speak to initially is to give us a brief overview of the real estate solutions and services your firm offers today. And I know on some of our prep calls, there were more services than certainly I was aware of. So Sean, how about if we start with you on this one?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. And again, hello, everyone. So I think what I would say just at a very, very high level, so IWG kind of founded the workspace revolution, and we've kind of continued to move forward to this date. Clearly, within the last 15 months, there's been a lot of changes. And I would say that the major service ultimately that we're providing today is to partner with our global enterprise clients to help them understand the solutions, the products, and define their strategies as they move forward in kind of this unprecedented time. So the kind of all up, all in, we're spend a lot of time in a very consultative vein, working through multiple eventualities, setting ourselves up for success as we all move forward.
Great, thank you, Sean. Brittany, why don't we go to you next?
Great, thanks. Great to be here. Very fun. I would say for us, it's certainly, to Sean's point, been a very consultative past few months in the sense that we're really helping folks get back. And it's no longer just having folks at desks, right? So what we have is an all access option, which allows people to access the closest WeWork to them and just pop in wherever they need, similar to that of a gym membership where they can go in, use the amenities. I like to call it the marriage saver. It just gets people out of the house. And then we also have more formal hubs where they're private offices where folks can go meet with teams, whether that be for innovative sprints or, as we in Massachusetts in particular start to open up, just to have more formal arrangements for returning to work. On the larger scale, we are still offering large HQ full floor suites, which are privatized, more extensive branding, what have you. And I do think that that's going to be a big part of the future of our business, where we're right now attracting a lot of clients who typically weren't ready to take on the flex space. I think we're attracting a lot of typically staunch traditional real estate professionals, and now we're exploring these larger relationships. So it's a really exciting time to be here and have a lot to offer, which is fun.
Excellent. Thanks, Brittany. Lindsay, what's CB seeing and offering through Hannah these days?
Yeah, well, I won't go into everything that CBRE offers because I'd probably take up this entire call. And I think a lot of you guys are pretty familiar with CBRE. But what I think I would call attention to is that CBRE in February of this past year actually announced a 40% investment in another flex provider called Industrious, which actually included the sale of Hana, so my previous business, to Industrious, really consolidating those efforts. And I call attention to that because it really signals, I think, to the marketplace the vast importance flex, really we're putting on flex now, CB's putting on flex, and the importance that it really plays in our clients' real estate strategies going forward. So CBRE really needed a network of flex locations at scale immediately, and COVID only accelerated that.
Excellent. Just as a little bit of a follow-up question on this one, and sort of based on conversations we had leading up to this, I know several of you, if not all of you, mentioned that some of the services you now offer relate to things like change management and space utilization analytics. And curious to know, are those more recent service offerings for you? And are they offered as standalone services, or are you generally doing that in support of clients who are coming to you looking for the physical space aspect of flexible solutions? So maybe, Sean, if you want to talk about that in a little more depth.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you nailed it, Suzanne, is really what everybody is looking for as we're all kind of re-educating ourselves and aligning for success moving forward, is maybe some of the past practices and past processes that we've all employed to kind of effectively manage a real estate portfolio as it relates to site selection, whereby in the past you may have targeted a head count that we're going to expand over 5 years or 7 years time. Effectively now, and you're saying, well, are those people going to return to an office? Are they not going to return to an office? Are they in the same location that they were when we're starting this process, as many people have moved during the pandemic? And then you would take that headcount number and projected headcount number, multiply that times an allocation of space on a per person or per square meter basis, depending upon where you lived in the world. You would then go to market and you would finalize a space. As we're all realizing that either none, some, or bits of that no longer apply. So we're really retooling that. And I think some of the things that you mentioned, about space utilization, we'll call it a membership program, which effectively enables clients to access not only their HQ, but perhaps a regional hub, whether it's in an IWG or a WeWork or a HANA or an Industrious or any other, but augmenting that with literally app-enabled access to, within the confines of the IWG network, 3,500 locations across the globe, where you could pop in and drop into an office for an hour or for a day, or use a meeting room for an hour or for a day. So as you're trying to package these solutions, they're a bit customizable when you kind of get into a very granular level. But yes, everybody wants the ability to view what is happening so that they can align themselves for success in the here and the now. Look at utilization, not only of the dedicated locations or their HQ, but also look at utilizations of the membership program. Who's using it, where are they using it, and why are they using it? And if you kind of take the way real estate strategy was managed going forward and portfolio execution, it was, where do we want to be? How many people are going to be there and how much space do we need? Now you can literally make educated decisions, not based upon projections or anecdotal data, but on actual realistic data. So it really sets you up for success by having this data and making decisions that are based upon fact moving forward.
Excellent. Brittany, your thoughts on this topic as well?
Yeah, I think Sean covered it very well on the data side. I think that everyone is really looking for the actual data portal, and that's something we've been providing as all-encompassing for all of our WeWork members. How they activate the space, how they go in. It's captured in 3 ways: actually entering the building, checking in guests, and then how they use conference rooms and all of that. We also, as people begin to travel more and more, we're hopeful that looking at how badges are used across our 850 locations, to Sean's point, understanding where we may need to expand, pivot, and grow with our partners. There are 2 other things I'd like to add. I think that what's really interesting, we all have been talking so much about commercial real estate, but what's going on the residential side has just been wild and directly impacting us. So I think what has been interesting is partnering with our clients to resurface those employee surveys, understand where their local teams settled. A lot of folks moved to New Hampshire, all different areas, and how do we map our portfolio against theirs, and offering that service so that teams no longer feel like they have to make it to downtown Crossing a few days a week. Instead, we may be able to offer a few options for them in Cambridge to speak to the Massachusetts market in particular. So I think it's bringing work to the workforce as opposed to bringing the workforce to the spaces. And then one other piece I would just add is COVID was a horrible time for a lot of people, but a lot of businesses doubled in size, especially in the healthcare sector. So one thing I was surprised that has been such a huge focus for us is you can take aggregate all of the data, but then what are you going to do with it in terms of activating the space? And we've seen a lot of demand for that, where we can partner with folks and say, hey, we saw that not a lot of people are coming into the office on Thursday. So in return, our community teams are doing a lot to create events to get people back to the office, excited to collaborate. And in turn, that's creating a culture for these teams that may just be meeting each other for the first time. So I'd say it's not only supporting providing the data, but then supporting it on the longer term, and getting space activation back to where it was.
Terrific. Lindsay, thoughts from you?
Yeah, well, in a past life, I actually worked at a company called Zipcar that some of you might know. It's a car sharing company. And in like 2008, 2009, there was a massive kind of evolution happening in transportation. And we're really seeing that evolution happening in real estate now, and particularly in office space. We at Zipcar used to say it's about access over ownership. I think you're starting to see this shift in even enterprise companies looking at ways to provide their employees with, as Sean was talking about, an access model versus a complete ownership model. And the other thing we're hearing a lot from companies, large occupiers, is they need a release valve, right? They need to use flex as this way to not have to take space, as Sean was kind of talking about, that meets 10 years into the future, but right now, and then leverage flex for those peak demand or for future growth, because no one knows what their business is going to be 5 years from now, and really honestly even 6 months from now. So we're really seeing flex becoming not just for these smaller, ones and twos or 10-person companies, but large occupiers saying, how do I look at this from a holistic portfolio? And how do I satisfy the needs of my remote workers, but also those people that are coming into my headquarters every day, but maybe not every single day?
So,
Suzanne, can I make just one quick follow-up?
Oh, sure, of course, please.
I think they made some excellent points, right? And so we're kind of using it. It was kind of interesting, and I just had thought of this. We're kind of using flex as a bit of a noun to describe this whole sector, right? And really, it's now more than just a kind of a sector. It's everyone is looking for flexibility, right? The definition of flexibility is really where all of us, I think, come into play. Because yes, it's easy to say I want flexibility, but how do I put in a strategic plan and ultimately go out and execute this plan, knowing full well that things are going to change, whether it's in 6 months or 6 days. And if we all look at how we've spent, and many of us with the past 15 months in planning sessions, we have probably rejigged the same plan 86 ways, right? In some way, shape, or form. So it's enabling your workforce, because at the end of the day, it's all about talent acquisition and retention, but enabling that workforce wherever they may be, whether they're in the same place they were 15 months ago or somewhere else, as Brittany has mentioned, setting them up for success, mitigating risk by getting myself in a position where I'm going to overcommit for something that I may never need, and ensuring that I have that ability to scale up, down, or over as the needs of the business dictate. And I think any solution that most organizations are aligning on today are very, very near-term solutions, but giving themselves the kind of the release valve option to scale up, down, or over as the needs of their business dictate. And I think to that end, within this flexibility, I think it's okay to not have all the pieces of the puzzle today because we don't have them, but look at the knowns, focus on what do I know and how do I enable myself and my organization for success right now, knowing that I'll have the option to change as the world changes, as the workforce changes, and ultimately as the needs of the business change as well.
And Sean, following up on that point, which is an interesting one I wanted to drill into, I'm curious to know the companies that you're working with now, and you sort of spoke to this, that perhaps they're approaching flexible space a bit more on a short-term interim approach now as we sort of are coming out of the pandemic, hopefully globally. But are you also seeing any distinct trends that are quite different now than they were, prior to last March when all this went down, where you're seeing, I think I see that this will ultimately be a long-term shift in our business and business model. So, and also not to put too much in here, but if you're able to speak to, if any of you can speak to it, globally as well, because I know a number of folks on the call like myself have global portfolios. So Sean, as sort of a follow-up to your comments there, anything more specific on that?
Yeah, so just one point of edification, right? I think that is it a short-term option, right? Just to kind of, a bridge the gap measure, if you will, could be. Or many organizations have made a very fundamental strategic shift to say, we are going to have X% of our portfolio in a flexible model. Flexible doesn't mean short-term. Flexibility, just to kind of give an additional definition, is full transferability. So within the global network that we have of 3,500 locations today, you could start up a team in San Francisco pre-pandemic. If that team has now shifted to Phoenix or Massachusetts or Dallas or Tennessee, you pick up the hub that you had, the dedicated solution, and you transfer it to any of those markets literally the next day. Or those people may say, listen, I now work here. I have I've invested a lot of money in my home over the past 15 months, or I've set myself up for success. I have a home office that works for my needs. And many organizations have helped provision those things. But the marriage saver pass, as Brittany calls it, I'm getting kicked out of the house, right? I'm getting the boot. I just need a place to go for an hour or for a day, or to collaborate with specific members of my team, have one-on-ones, etc. I can literally do that on demand. I can do that as that day I wake up and say, listen, I've got to go, or I'm having dinner across town. I don't want to drive in rush hour traffic, quote unquote. But what I want to do is I want to work at a location closest to there. I find that on an app and literally would check in, to equate it to much like a hotel, right? So, how organizations strategically have shifted. I think that, and I've been doing this for a long time, probably longer than I would care to admit, right? Is I think, kind of if you wind back the hands of time, it started as really, the serviced office business, or even before that, executive suites. It was like, I need a short-term solution in a very specific market, and usually it related to kind of poor planning on somebody else's part in terms of why I need it, and I need it stood up tomorrow, right? So it was almost like I really don't want to get involved in it that much, but let's just do it. Then it shifted to really kind of early adopters that were looking to expand quickly. Speed to market was key. Many technology companies, medical companies, et cetera. If I'm the first in the market, I stake my claim. We're up, we're going, and we're on our way. And we've helped many organizations for a very long time kind of be the first in. And now you've almost got a point where now, as opposed to having all critical and key functions, right? So it's no longer just a real estate play, if you will. It's now HR is getting involved in these decisions. IT is getting instrumentally involved. Health and safety is getting instrumentally involved in these. All the governance is getting involved. It's now gone from being kind of a run in parallel to really, it's all kind of merging together. And I think tying back to the flexible nature of this is, has everybody cracked the code kind of full stop? The answer is no, but that's okay, because you have the ability to augment and adjust as the needs of the business dictate.
Yeah. Terrific. Lindsay, your further thoughts on this topic?
Yeah. Sean, you said a lot of really, really interesting things, but if I think about what has changed over the past 2 years, or even year and a half, I would look at it from the landlord perspective. I really like diving into what's happened with our landlord partners. And when Hana started about 2 years ago, we were really focused on these kind of co-invest models or management agreements, and that was really new to the marketplace. And then now we're seeing that really take off, a lot more of these co-invest partnership models. And the reason behind it is because occupiers are saying to their landlords, I don't want to take a traditional lease in your building unless I have this access to flexible space. So, going back to this idea of this release valve, these models are really taking off because, landlords are getting involved. They're viewing flex as amenity for the entire asset. We actually at CBRE recently released our global occupier survey. We've been doing it about every 6 months. And one thing that came out kind of each time, we've done this every 6 months throughout the pandemic, was that flex is now the #1 amenity that occupiers are asking of their landlords. And, that's because they need not only that release valve, but great amenity space. They need a trusted partner to know, hey, you know what, there's food and beverage downstairs. If I need to have a meeting, that's available. And so flex is now becoming, in order to sign these longer term leases, a must-have amenity in the building. And I think the other thing that I would share that's changed, and Sean was getting at this, is the involvement in the C-suite. The C-suite has never been more involved in corporate real estate decisions than they are today. If you look at the headlines from Amazon and Google and all of these companies, it's changing almost every day based upon what their employees are saying. So, one breath they'll come out and say, we're going to be office focused. And then we know that there's a little bit of an uproar and, they'll say, okay, well, we're somewhere in the middle. So it's really incumbent on us to, to help the C-suite and the HR professionals and IT professionals really look at their portfolio holistically, their needs of their employees, and then provide them a variety of options, because no one has the answers, but everyone's asking the questions.
Yeah. Brittany, what are you seeing at WeWork on this?
Yeah, these are all great. A lot of points already covered. I suspect there are people on this call who are poking their heads to just see how their plans are comparing to what other folks are seeing in the market. So we have seen some organic trends come from COVID that we didn't really necessarily see so much of before. I think everyone can agree that we're seeing a 2 to 3 day work week for most individuals. Onus is on the person based on their business unit or what they see as best. We're seeing that we're about 150 square feet per person as far as a dedicated desk goes. Certainly wasn't the case 2 years ago. We have a lot of amenities that are shared, so that teams still have access to about 20% of their floor, where it's, different soft seating, phone booths, and all of that. So that all remains, but just the standard desk space has certainly increased given COVID. I would say that there's also, to Lindsay's point, there's definitely a healthcare benefit here that we're not looking at, as far as being able to say work closer to HR understand that the people who are voluntold to work from home, that they still need optionality to get out. So that's an interesting conversation where before it was just the real estate team. Now you're talking about how do we play into larger benefit opportunities as far as employee retention and attraction. And I would say those are just the standard trends we're seeing. We're very lucky, similar to Sean said, when you have a large global portfolio, you do get to see what is working and more importantly failing as far as your Asia portfolio. So we can work with our colleagues and say, you know, let's not make that mistake again. Or I think other folks would really enjoy that. And I think it's been I certainly don't mean to say it's been great. It's been a pandemic after all, but being able to work with your colleagues globally and understanding what different clients are looking for as far as standard trends. I think we have a good grasp on what the baseline is. Everyone's different though.
Excellent.
The one point, and I think they both said it, and I'll add on just quickly. Is what we're seeing from the client/occupier perspective is cash is definitely king right now. Capital expenditures on fit out and design that were kind of par for the course in 2019 and before that are now being highly scrutinized. To Lindsay's point, the C-suite is involved, and that means the CFO is involved. And he's saying, why do I want to spend millions of dollars to fit something out if I don't ultimately know how that's going to work? And one of our responses to that is to re-educate clients with our model and many others' model is you have the ability to do bespoke, customized construction design work. Include that in the cost of your monthly fee. So effectively, we're bearing the brunt of that. Amortize that out over the term of the agreement. So we're really helping package the solution, for lack of a better word, so that all the applicable stakeholders that are laying eyes on it and going through the approval queue, it will pass muster with each one of them. So you're kind of not looking at this massive expenditure up front. You put it into more of an operating expense over time, and I think it's been incredibly beneficial. And it's always good to leverage someone else's cash that's not your own conserve.
Yeah, Sean, I'll dovetail off that actually. We're doing some interesting deals, and I don't know if you and Brittany are seeing this too with larger enterprise companies. So for example, not just with FlexSpace, but kind of holistically within the CBRE platform, you can do things like, a large company might want to sublease to us some of their space, and then we are the experience services arm for all of their space, and we integrate it all together. Then they're monetizing, their excess capacity while we have access. We're able to put our solution in there, and it really becomes this integrated building offering with experience services, flex space, traditional lease. All of that together is becoming such a powerful model that I think we're going to continue to see more and more of.
Yeah, and then often, it's kind of a three-way partnership where you have the client, you have the landlord, and then ultimately you have, in my case, IWG involved, right? And we're ultimately trying to provide a solution not only to the client but to the potential other tenants in the building as well. Everybody has their best interests. Everybody has a bit of skin in the game. And at the end of the day, these solutions are benefiting everyone involved.
Wonder, I have to say, I'm taking a lot of notes here. And I'll definitely be taking back to my team. Brittany, I wanted to have you start on our next question. Because obviously, particularly in this Boston, Cambridge area, there's a lot of demand for lab space, and it's certainly the demand is outpacing the supply. So just curious because that's an area of specialty for you. What do you see the opportunities there for flex space, and how are the life science industry leveraging flex space today?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get it all day long. I think that what we're seeing is, in the lab space just being so highly coveted in the Cambridge area in particular, there's really no room anymore to have folks who aren't using lab for the majority of their day to go there for work. So that's where Flex is just a direct supplement to any sort of lab space, where the folks who are maybe more on the administrative side or just looking for their heads down space on the research side, we're able to map our portfolio against theirs and complement the exact lab space with more traditional office or collaboration space. So no longer paying for employees who don't need that expensive lab space to be in the labs. And I think that it's an interesting progression too, as far as Mass goes, as we're seeing Cambridge was traditionally always lab focused, but we're seeing a lot of companies move closer to the seaport just by way of natural spillover. So it's nice to be able to complement that natural progression as well.
Oh, nice. Lindsay, thought from you on either the life sciences or other industries in particular that you think are sort of wading into this territory now?
Well, I mean, being probably industry agnostic, I would actually say that Flex is really all about offsetting the unknown. So you can kind of, you think about it from any perspective or any industry, whether it's, you know, industrial retail, like we're even seeing it happen in kitchens too, where Flex is kind of becoming an interesting model, or shared services. So really using Flex or kind of these shared services to not have to have, I think Sean was talking about, just, you know, relying on your traditional footprint, and really leveraging Flex for that excess capacity that you're keeping for the just in case moments. I think it's really, it's something that, you know, all industries, I think, will start to adopt further, you know, including life sciences for those kind of peak demand moments.
Sean, thoughts on that? Particularly, obviously you're not in the Boston area, but I'm sure you have some thoughts in general on that, because life science is such a heavy industry right now.
Yeah. So first of all, the two answers that were just given, I think, are spot on. You know, and then I think, as you know, I think Brittany made a really good point, right? The lab is the lab, and then, you know, our non-lab employees, you know, dedicated into that space, right? Is that their assigned seat? Are they even showing up would be probably the bigger question that I would ask, especially as we're standing here talking today. Then you got to say, okay, if I'm gonna lift and shift those someplace else, is that going to be a good return on my investment? Because now I'm going to increase my cost so that I can expand my lab. I can't answer that question, and many, you know, people that are attending this session today probably could better than I. The one thing, and just kind of tying it all back to that flexibility, is if you don't know, set up all of the office employees that don't need full-time access to the lab on a completely on-demand membership program, whereby if they need access to a location, if they need access to a meeting room, if they need access to collaborate with their peers, they can literally make those decisions on the fly. It's 100% variable cost at a very nominal rate. And then you can look at the data and see, are people using it? Do they need it? And because we provide kind of that utilization reporting on the back end, then you can make decisions. Do I stand up, you know, a flexible office solution for them? Is it okay just to have a membership program for them? And as opposed to kind of diving in head first and saying, I'm going to sign up for some extended period of time, whether I know that I need it or whether I don't, that I know that I don't. Just kind of a practical example of what I was referring back to earlier. Yeah.
Sean, I think that's just the natural progression of the conversations we're having. To Lindsay's point, industry agnostic. I think it's really dipping your toe in the water with any sort of all access program, and then onus is on us to analyze that data and provide different tranches in which they can grow in the space. And that isn't necessarily always, the conversations were probably a little bit more horizontal pre-COVID. How do you grow up and down in Boston? And there was a lot more focus on flexibility within the lease term. But I think Sean mentioned earlier, it's really become more of a vertical conversation of how do we deploy this partnership across the country, world, as we test this out.
You know, back at Zipcar, we used to talk about this idea of a transportation portfolio. So each person had their kind of ways in which they would get around. So a traditional car, you know, Uber, Zipcar, you name it. And you really needed the ecosystem for everything to work. And what we're doing now in real estate is retooling that ecosystem and rebuilding it so that everyone has their own kind of office or real estate portfolio in a really different way. And we're creating all these new models, these different access models, so that you can have access to a meeting space when you need to, heads down work when you need to, whatever you might need. We're really putting the employee at the center of deciding how they want to work and then providing them that portfolio of options. And it's been really amazing to watch the transportation industry go through it, and now the real estate industry go through this.
Yeah, and just to dovetail off that is you may need, if you have a dedicated location within the confines of one of our locations, is you may need a collaborative space in the morning and then a heads down space in the afternoon, right? And so we're effectively partnering with our clients. We have a kind of a design your office program, for lack of a better terminology. They say, hey, let's put everything on casters, or let's put there's kind of mobile whiteboards solutions in place. Soft seating is a critical piece, and literally you can adjust the needs of your space kind of on the fly, and use it for so it's taking flexibility and even making it more flexible to alter as the needs of your business dictate. And it could be a boardroom, the day after that. And I think that all that, kind of all in encompassing are going back to saying, I know I want flexibility, but partnering with whomever that the clients and occupiers deem as the resident expert, and saying, what are the solutions, what are the options, what are other companies doing, what are your best practices, and tying that back ultimately to help educate. Yeah,
I think we could devise plans all we want and consult the strategies with the clients based on data, but at the end of the day, once we start to get the ball rolling, we have to keep folks excited to come to work. And I think before we were competing with direct leases in theory as a flex provider. I think now you're competing with the comforts of home. So to make sure that teams are enjoying coming in from the very baseline personal service, tiny touches, to larger events, and keeping people inspired and excited is going to be a huge piece on what could eventually become a talent more like we saw with big tech a few years ago.
Yeah.
Jason looks, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
And change management, the whole change management element of that, we've spent a load of time, as I'm sure my other colleagues have, talking about change management, talking about communication to kind of inspire the workforce to utilize and adopt these programs, because it's one thing to do it. It's another thing, as Brittany, I think, astutely pointed out, is to inspire your teams and educate, what is it, how do you do it, where do you do it? And the initial feedback that we get literally every time, because we monitor the feedback quite closely, is, where has this been my whole life, right? And like, how come I couldn't work 5 minutes away from my home? I've been driving 2 hours every single day. And so you kind of have those aha moments, but it's quite fascinating.
Jason, looks like I think there's been a little back and forth on the Q&A on a particular topic, if you want to tee that up for the panel.
Yeah, and I think all the panelists have touched on this, but maybe they'd like to elaborate a little bit more. So it's really about the hub and spoke model. So a lot of companies are looking at, as we know, the residential trends with the flood to the suburban market. A lot of companies are looking at expanding their portfolio to support offices within the suburban market. And so this question is really around, what are you guys doing for expansion and opening up more offices in the suburban market? And maybe talk a little bit more about what those offices could look like for companies, as far as like maybe dedicated space. I know, Sean, you just talked a little bit about that, but more about like maybe branding, also like safety, security, VPN networks, things of that nature that really makes the employees feel like it's part of their company when they get to those offices.
Yeah, so I'll take the first go quickly. So with 3,500 locations across the globe, in 110 different countries, the reality is we are in the CBDs, we're in the suburban markets, and we're in a whole lot of tertiary markets today. And I would expect that trend to continue. So this isn't something that we need to start kind of thinking about. We're already there. And we can do, kind of to employee home matching, we can do to, portfolio matching of where their existing locations are today. And tie that back to everyone that's interested. I think the other piece that you mentioned are, how do I make sure that the space is secure? It checks the boxes from a health and safety standpoint. The IT, data security, physical security, all those pieces. And I was kind of talking about before, it's really aligning all those functional stakeholders with the appropriate people on our team. So we have SMEs for each of those. Understanding what their expectations are, relaying what capabilities, what our standard procedures and protocols are, making sure that it aligns with their expectations, because now is you would not be able to stand up one of these locations anywhere unless everybody's signed off on it, right? Because it's a bit more of a, I don't want to say a longer term play, but because it's a more strategic integrated element, it requires a lot more involvement. So we cover all that off up front. We make sure it's fully transparent, and we feel confident that ultimately it will pass muster with everyone. And before we do any type of execution and implementation.
Brittany, thoughts on that hub and spoke model that was raised in the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So our bread and butter has always been main on main Class A buildings. To Sean's point, it's really more than ever big focus on LEED certified buildings and HVAC and covering all of that. We just put $20 million into COVID infrastructure. So as far as making these Class A buildings feel like home for a lot of these folks in these standard cities has sort of been our forte here. I think with that, we look at markets like New York City, and we just did a study that the average New Yorker lives 15 minutes away from a WeWork based on walking or biking. A lot of people not wanting to take public transport, having access what might be right next door in markets like New York, San Francisco, we're there. I think as we continue to expand and when the world opens up, very important, I think all of our colleagues here do realize this, that the experience be the same in each building. So if you're a traveling executive, not fumbling on how to connect to the Wi-Fi and things of that nature is key, especially as nerves will be increased traveling internationally in the next few months. And that's something that we really focus on, is just the overall service and making sure that whatever we accommodate for you in one market is mirrored in the other, whether it be on the tech side, security, just making sure that all is following suit.
Yeah, Lindsay, are you seeing requests for that model as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was during the height of the pandemic, this idea that it's going to be the death of the city or the city central hub. And, our chief economist at CBRE recently came out with some information that said people are heading back to cities, and at least for work. The challenge right now, not to go too deep onto this, but is public transit. People are still scared of public transit, so they're driving in and they're only going in 1 to 2 days a week. But people are heading back for those larger meetings, and that's where the hub model really comes in, and it's happening now. And then I think to Brittany's earlier point, the spoke is the marriage protector. It's like, I'm going to go in there because someone's bothering me. I have 2 kids at home. I'm going to sit in the spoke model close to home, and then I'm going to take my car and I'm going to drive in, hopefully sooner or later get back on public transit for those big meetings where we all need to come together. There isn't a solution, unless you're a small business, there isn't a solution where all of your 5,000 employees in an area are going to be able to meet in a small suburban area, a small suburban market. That's going to be too hard. Like, cities are centrally located for everyone to get together, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, I think back to working closer with HR, I think a lot of messaging in the height of COVID in markets like California you can move up to 150 miles in the pandemic. Well, now everyone's being called home, or alternatively, how do we accommodate these lifetime decisions that folks made? And what we're seeing is, keeping that one large hub with a lot of branding that feels like headquarters. And when you go there, you're going to collaborate or hopefully celebrate and have those larger team meetings. But in the interim, for that 2 to 3 day a week, having that 20-person office where you can still peel off and have those smaller team meetings, or everyone's liking my marriage saver thing. I should have coined that.
Be rich.
Those heads down spaces too, that are, you can hop on your bike and get to.
Yeah, terrific. Well, I know you all did a great job of educating me initially when we were talking about this, kicking this program off. And, I was calling it co-working space, and you guys all corrected me. The better term these days is flexible space. And I know, also I probably had, preconceived idea about the co-working being more, smaller startups, entrepreneurial, but clearly what we all have been talking about today is for much larger companies and how they're going to leverage that. But I am curious to know, do you still have those small companies and startups and individuals who are using your space in that way too? And if so, sort of what's the percent of sort of large companies who use this as one tool in their toolkit of their portfolio versus companies that just are using your space to help build and start up as they grow? So I don't know, Brittany, maybe start with you.
Sure. I mean, it's been really amazing just to see the past year, healthcare in particular, the injections that a lot of these companies are getting. Teams may have started off as 10 people, but being in the right time, right place, and being able to make an impact on what we've been going through the past few months, all of a sudden those teams of 10 become teams of 100 with a forecast 200 across the country by next week. A direct lease can't accommodate that type of growth. So very much so still ingrained with this startup culture, if you will. I mean, I think we're steering away from, Tivas and beer in the office and those conceptions of what co-working once was, but the standardization around having flexibility in a lease and what we've really been echoing is perfect for these growth companies. And even next level, we start to have stronger relationships with the investors themselves, really being able to help across their entire portfolio, making sure that everyone gets access to the same type of potential opportunity, and how it hits their P&L is very important. Understanding that under 12 months, it's different. So I think very much so still accommodating those guys, but really excited to also build them out of headquarters 2 years from now.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we only have 3 minutes left. I want to make sure, I know the Zoom call will cut off. So very quickly, Lindsay and Sean, maybe some final thoughts from you on that or any other topic you'd like to touch on.
Well, I would just say, it's easier to move a speedboat than it is a cruise ship. And that's really what's happening with the transactions today. So while we're all talking about enterprise, a lot of the transactions that are happening immediately or the return to office is starting with these smaller companies. Our data from CBRE says that. It's time for the enterprise conversation, the larger companies conversation is starting now because they have to move an entire cruise ship. So we're seeing a lot of small companies come back to the office. They're a great test model. And then the planning is really starting and happening with the larger organizations with Flex.
Oh, great. And Sean, final thoughts from you.
Yeah. So first of all, everybody did an amazing job. My co-panelists. So really well done. Suzanne, thank you for setting this up. Yeah, I think the final thought is whether we're in a revolution or whether we're in an evolution of flexibility kind of remains to be seen. And it may go without saying, but make sure that that everybody is seeking counsel from someone that can speak intelligently, has best practices, has guidance, and is sharing that openly and transparently with you. And myself and my team, that's really our mission, is to be transparent. And at the end of the day, I am encouraging anyone and everyone that will listen to me, do not overcommit. Take the lowest fixed cost commitment that you possibly can to give yourself that opportunity going forward. And I think that's critical to understand in this day and age, and then make changes as the data and as your business ultimately change. So. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all of our panelists here. I know that you had indicated you would welcome any of our members reaching out to you to get more information or answer any questions. So encourage people to do that if they're interested. And thank you all for your time today. I found it really, really informative, and look forward to the next program we have coming up. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.